The Austrian psychiatrist Viktor Frankl wrote one of the most important books of the last 100 years. The book is called Man's Search for Meaning. It has sold probably around 50 million copies at this point, and it details his experiences as a Holocaust, not only inmate, but survivor. He wrote about his experiences in the Holocaust during World War II of the Nazis. He was Jewish. Viktor Frankl was. In that book, he details over and over and over, from his perspective, the ultimate reality, the ultimate truth, the number one thing that people need to understand in order to not only overcome any challenge, but to have a life of meaning and purpose. He stated it over and over again. And he taught people in the concentration camps. He said that everything me and the other people, there were a few rabbis in there and people who were trying to give people hope and purpose. They did everything they could. And he could predict with unlimited accuracy. He could predict when people would die because he saw that this number one reality, this number one truth would fade from people's eyes. And so then after he did survive, by applying the truth that he tried to help people understand, he then dedicated his life to teaching people this fundamental concept. And so in this video, I'm going to talk to you about this number one truth that Viktor Frankl dedicated his life to, that he wanted people to understand. And even before he went into the concentration camps, he had this perspective. Essentially, it can be summed up in the quote from Nietzsche, which he quoted over and over and over again. It was essentially his mantra. When you have a why to live for, you can bear almost any how. Now, there's a lot of nuance in this. Even in modern research on hope, it's more like if you have a why that you're committed to, you will find the how. There's a lot of research on hope. And I'm going to conceptualize Frankl's truth in a second, but I'm just giving you a little bit of context. All the research on hope these days breaks hope into three core categories. In order to have hope or to be a high hope person, and psychologists break high hope people against low hope people, but in order to have a high hope, you have to have three things. Number one, you have to have a goal that you're committed to, specific goal. High hope people have clear goals that they're committed to. Commitment is the key. Clarity is a key, but commitment is the key, because without commitment, you won't move forward. Once you're committed, you will find the way. And that leads to point number two, which is what psychologists call pathways thinking, which is that high hope people are constantly navigating towards their goals, and they're taking feedback from having experiences from not achieving their goals, and they're constantly moving and adjusting their pathway and their strategy and their approach, their skill set to get where they want to go. They're not stuck trying to do it one thing one way. It's the Einstein quote that low hope people are insane, where they're trying the same path or process over and over again and expecting a different result. No, high hope people, because they are clear and committed, and because they are committed, they ultimately will find the way. So that's kind of an expansion of Nietzsche's quote. Nietzsche said, when you have a why to live for, you can bear almost anyhow, which means you can overcome almost anything. You can deal with almost anything, and you can summit almost any challenge. But hope theory expands that to say not only can you overcome or bear anyhow, but you can also find the how from a strategic standpoint, from a pathways standpoint. The third aspect of hope is agency, that you actually believe you have some say in the matter. There's a lot of theories and perspectives these days that you have no agency, or that you have no free will, or that you have no say. And this is what psychologists would call an external locus of control, where you actually believe that you are completely irresponsible for everything that happens in your life, and that you are ultimately governed by external factors. Whereas an internal locus of control, which is associated with happiness, it's associated with career success, it's associated with relational success, it's associated with all forms of success and progress, is an internal locus of control where you take responsibility and you believe that you do have an impact. And so that's essentially what agency is that you believe you can find a way. You believe that you can overcome and bear anyhow. So the ultimate truth that Viktor Frankl taught those in the concentration camps, and he states it very bluntly many times in Man's Search for Meaning, is that he strived to help people have a goal, literally a GOAL, a goal that gave them purpose and meaning, a goal to which they could commit themselves to. And again, that goes right back to number one point in hope theory, is you have to have a goal that you're committed to. But as people, if you don't have a purpose for your future, your present becomes shattered. Even Frankl himself said this. He said, it is a peculiarity of man that he can only live by looking to the future. And this was an exact opposite perspective of most of the psychological theories of that time, such as Freud and Adler. A lot of the core believers, core theorists of psychology back then in the 1940s and things like that, they all believed that it was the past that ultimately dictated who a person was. Freud had the opposite perspective. Freud believed that it was a person's view of and commitment to their own purpose in the future that determined their mental well-being, their motivation. And he thought that if a person didn't have a meaning to fulfill in the future, a purpose to fulfill, a life's task, a mission, a sense of calling, something that ultimately they had a why to live for, using Nietzsche. If they didn't have that, then they had no meaning in their life, and they could not bear the difficulties of life. They could not bear the difficulties. They had no reason to bear the difficulties moving forward. They had no commitment to find a way. Viktor Frankl himself in the book talked about his why to live. Number one, he wanted to get reunited with his family, which he did not know that his wife had already been taken to another concentration camp. He didn't know that she was killed. So firstly, he wanted to be reunited with his wife, but secondly, he felt compelled. He felt a sense of purpose, a sense of mission, that he needed to get back out of the concentration camps and publish what would have been his book that was confiscated by the Nazis, who took the book and tore it apart. He wanted to get out and put those findings, his research, his ideas into a book and have that be published because he felt it was important. And so he found a way to survive. He found a way to get up early. He found a way to get moving. And so he said that what man needs is not a tensionless state, but rather the striving and struggling for a worthwhile goal, a freely chosen task. It's a worthwhile goal. That's actually what a lot of people explain courage as. Courage, you can't have courage without a worthwhile goal. Courage is actually three things. Courage is having a noble and worthwhile goal to which you are firmly committed. You won't be courageous without being committed. Courage is actually the moment of full commitment. And so you are moving forward intentionally. You're taking that action for yourself, and that action does involve some form of risk that scares you. There are consequences to what you're doing. Interestingly, all these ideas actually also link with research on flow, that in order to be in a flow state, you have to have a clear goal. This is a key condition of flow, is that you have to have a clear goal. Without having a clear goal, you don't actually know where to focus. You can't really be in flow without having something to point your attention towards and boundaries within to focus that on. And so you need to have clear goals that create constraints, but also something to focus on. There needs to be some form of challenge or risk involved. You've got to be outside your comfort zone. They call it the skill to challenge ratio, where the challenge is higher than your current skill level. So you're actually you're testing yourself, you're challenging yourself, you're having to stretch. But also the third aspect of flow is that there's immediate feedback to your actions. In other words, there's consequences to what you're doing. That's the risk component of courage. It's not courage if there's no perceived risk. Well, from a flow perspective, that perceived risk is immediate feedback, that something that triggers flow. And courage obviously triggers flow, because courage is you trying something that's outside your comfort zone, that you believe is worthwhile, that you're committed to, that you're intentionally going towards, but that does involve risk. That risk is the feedback, the consequences of your actions. That consequence could be physical harm or danger. It could be social. It could be that you lose your job, whatever it is, there are consequences. And that actually heightens your flow. So flow is having clear goals. It's the challenge of what you're doing is beyond your current skill level, and that there are immediate feedback. There are consequences. There are risks involved, which heighten your perspective, heighten your attention. The risks could be physical danger. The risks could be social. The risks could be that you're embarrassed. The risks could be that you're out in public trying something that you've never done before. As a simple example, me filming this video, I know that there's feedback. I'm going to publish this, and then there's going to be comments, and there's going to be, I'm going to get feedback for this. And so doing things obviously publicly, putting yourself out there, takes courage. It takes commitment and courage, and courage and commitment are very similar concepts. Courage is basically the moment of 100% commitment. Courage is the moment of kind of a point of no return psychology, where you're now going for it, and rather than avoiding what you don't want, you're approaching what you do, and you're willing to handle the feedback. You're willing to take on the consequences. You're willing to take the risks on. That's the moment of courage, is where you're intentionally moving towards something you believe to be noble and worthwhile, something you believe is important, and you're willing to take the consequences. You're willing to handle those rather than avoid them. Motivation is often camped into two categories, either approach orientation or avoidance. And you're not going to be courageous if you're avoiding consequences, if you're avoiding feedback, if you're avoiding risk. It's the moment that the commitment hits a place of courage, which is where you're now willing to approach what you want, what you believe to be noble, and you're willing to take on the consequences. So back to Frankl. Frankl said in the book, Man's Search for Meaning, that any attempt to help the prisoners by therapeutic methods had to point out to them a future goal to which they could commit themselves. Any other attempt was futile. If a person lost hope and meaning in their future, if they lost hope and commitment towards a noble aim to which they believed was worthwhile, If they didn't have a why to live for, they can't bear anyhow. If they didn't have a why to live for, then in such terrible conditions, they become passive. They become apathetic. Rather than being aware of the outside world, they become completely inward. They just seek to numb themselves. In that situation, they would smoke cigarettes, or they wouldn't share their food with other people. And then they would become retrospective and just think about the past and think about what was, because now there is no brighter future. There's nothing to move themselves for. They have no sense of agency. Now they have an external locus of control. So if you don't take ownership of your purpose for your future, if you don't enhance that hope and that commitment and that courage, and if you're not moving towards a future which you believe in, and to Frankl, he said, what man needs is not a tensionless state, but a striving and struggling towards a worthwhile goal, a freely chosen task. This is another important point, is that task is freely chosen. You choose your purpose. You choose what you're going to commit yourself to. You choose that noble aim. And that choosing is something that is intrinsically connected to you. It's something that's intrinsically motivating to you. It's something that's pulling you forward, not something you have to push with willpower. There's push and pull motivation. And this thing that you want to commit yourself to, that you believe in, that you're willing to overcome anyhow, bear anyhow, find a way, change your current pathway, change your current thinking, upgrade your current skills. Dan Sullivan actually has a model for this that I think is beautiful. Dan Sullivan, the founder of Strategic Coach, he has what he calls the 4 C's formula. He says that first you have commitment. You have to commit yourself to something above and beyond your current station. It's something that you believe in, a goal of some sort. And commitment then leads to courage. And courage is the willingness to try and fail. It's the taking on of risk. It's the taking your commitment to 100% level, where you're now moving towards it and you're willing to learn and grow through it. And as you go through this courage cycle, you eventually develop number 3 on Dan's C's, which is capability. Eventually, you develop the capability higher and higher levels through learning, through feedback, through continuous experience of trying and failing towards your future self. Josh Waitzkin would call this, and Josh Waitzkin wrote the incredible book, The Art of Learning. He would call this investing in loss. That if your current skills are here, but you're committing at this level and you're courageously trying on the in-between, eventually, this is investing in loss. You're going to experience failures, setbacks, challenges. You're going to have your current assumptions destroyed and shattered, and hopefully you learn and develop wisdom, but eventually you develop new levels of capability. Capability is skills, it's confidence, it's relationships, it's perspectives, it's context, but you're developing new capabilities, a new version of you, a new identity, new skills, new standards, and eventually you can achieve at the level of your commitment. And that then leads to a state of higher levels of confidence. And a higher level of confidence then enables you, you're higher up on a mountain, I guess you could say. First off, you attract better options, better situations, better opportunities, because as James Allen would say, you don't attract what you want, but you attract what you are. Once you've gone through commitment cycles and transformed yourself through those commitment cycles, once you've developed higher levels of capability and confidence, paid the price. Stephen R. Covey would often talk about, you can have anything you want if you're willing to pay the price. Well, the price is commitment, courage, and then developing capabilities and dealing with the feedback, dealing with the repercussions, and ultimately transforming yourself into a person with those capabilities and ultimately that confidence. You change who you are. And then back to James Allen, you don't attract what you want, you attract what you are, because you now have higher levels of capability and confidence, a much firmer sense of identity because you've watched yourself commit to things that you care about. Then you attract fundamentally different perspectives, different opportunities, and also you see things differently. You now see incredible opportunities that you couldn't have seen before, and you have the confidence to pursue them. You have the capability to pursue them, which then leads through the cycle again, Dan cycle again, of now you're at a higher platform and you can commit to higher and higher things. And confidence in a lot of ways is self-trust. It's self-trust because you've watched yourself commit to things and complete them. And you can build your confidence in small and subtle ways by doing small things where you make a promise to yourself and you fulfill. You create an alarm, you set your alarm and you tell yourself the number one thing you're going to do in the morning. You wake up when you say you would, and you do what you said you would do. This builds confidence. And over time, you can make bigger and bigger commitments to yourself and to others and fulfill on those, even seemingly impossible things. You can find a way because you are committed. And when you are committed, when the why is strong enough, you will not only bear anyhow, but you will find the how. And so you will create higher and higher commitments way above your current skill level, way above your current knowledge level, and you will, through your commitment, find the way and transform your capability and your confidence over and over again. That is something that you can do and become. So that is the number one truth that Frankl wanted people to know. It's something that I detail very heavily in this book, Be Your Future Self Now. In this book, I talk about that there are 7 threats to your future self, 7 truths about your future self, and 7 steps to be your future self. And the number one threat, which I talk about, and I detail in depth the research on hope theory, but also Frankl's perspectives. Also the research on grit, because Angela Duckworth's research on grit points directly to the research on hope, that you can't really have grit without hope. And she admits that hope is honestly what gets you started, but it's also what sustains you along the way. You won't be gritty. You won't overcome the hows and transform yourself and build skills without hope. Hope is to the psychology what food is to the body. You need hope. Like without hope, human psychology withers and fails. Down below, if you're in the United States, you can get the Kindle version of this for free. If not, I challenge you to buy this book, Be Your Future Self Now. This lays out a lot of the latest research and perspectives on future self, on hope, on purpose. And I detail very deeply in this book Frankl's perspectives. So down below, if you're in the United States, you can just click the link and get the free Kindle. If not, go ahead and grab the book. Also, free Kindle of this book, which is my second book with Dan Sullivan, entrepreneurial coach and strategic coach, The Gap in the Gain. Down below, if you're in the United States, you can get the Kindle. If not United States, I'm really sorry. I know that YouTube's a massive platform. For those not in the United States or even in the United States, there's also a link to my peak state checklist, which is the morning routine checklist I created a few years ago that's been downloaded almost 1 million times. Please like this video. Please subscribe. Have an amazing day.